So now we've had a chance to go through the 4-step pedagogy within the game sense model. 4 steps in that we play the small-sided game first with explicit student outcomes, then we use open-ended questioning, then we replay the game, and then we modify a task constraint so that the students can practice their skills and abilities within variable scenarios. So we're going to use a specific example of a 4 versus 4 tag invasion game in a 10v10 meter square. So one team has possession of the ball, the other team doesn't have possession of the ball. The team with the ball is aiming to tag as many players on the opposition in 1 minute as they can, but the ball carrier can't run with the ball. We start off with really short, concise rules, only 4 to 5, no more, and we get the students into it straight away. 1 minute to tag, and then we swap over. So imagine the students are having 2 minutes of really intense activity, and it's intense because there's only 4 on a team. Student outcomes should be really explicit. So for example, we might have 2 skill-based examples or outcomes, and that could be knowing or developing when to pass the ball and developing our understanding of how to pass the ball. A third outcome could be a social one. This game's fantastic for developing teamwork, so that could be our third outcome. So that's our game that we've played. So the second step is to use open-ended questions which are directly related back to the 3 student outcomes which we determined at the start. So for example, we could ask a question like, what type of pass was the best to use and why? So within this game, the students or some students will hopefully work out that short, fast and sharp passes are by far the best passes to use in this game in order to get as many tags on the opposition as possible. Why? Because there's not as much time then for the team without the ball to move away from the ball. Versus if it was a long, slow pass, there'd be plenty of time to move away so they're not tagged. Where was the easiest place on court to force a tag? So again, the students might come up with any responses, but it could be something like in the corners. Fantastic. How do you work together as a team, and could you improve your teamwork, and how? So there's some really good questions, and then we'd replay the game, but before we replay the game we would summarize 2 to 3 key points or responses from the students. We would do that so that then guides the students into thinking about what they need to do or what they need to action immediately prior to repeating the game. So for example, we could say one of the key points, we established the best pass to use was a short, sharp pass. Second, we also decided that the best place on court to force a tag was in the corners. Thirdly, we talked about teamwork, and we decided that the 4 of us can create a small square and move the ball around that way. Now let's repeat the game. So that's a little bit of the process in terms of how we utilize the questions, and we can replay the game and question multiple times. Then once the students have repeated the process and replayed the games a few times, we would be observing the student actions and seeing if they're improving within the game. And I'll guarantee that you will see almost an immediate response or better actions within the game even after 1 or 2 times of questioning and getting back into the game. So the really important things here are short, sharp games, questioning specific to the student outcomes, and I like to have those outcomes written up on a board that the students can constantly refer back to. All right, so we can repeat that process a few times until we're happy that we're seeing some really good student responses in that game. Then we would modify one element of the game or one constraint. So remember what our definition of the constraints were from within the module. So an example could be, all right, we are now going to increase the size of the area to maybe about a 15 by 15 meter, and we're going to replay the game. So we'd replay it. We could ask similar questions, but now we could ask the obvious question about how did increasing the area change the focus of the game? Did it make it easier for the attackers, or did it make it easier for the team without the ball? We would go through that process of questioning, replay the game, then we'd modify another task constraint. So for example, we could change the ball to a frisbee, which for most students will be a much harder object to throw and catch. So that now may make it more difficult for the team trying to get tags. But all of the time, the most important thing is that we are not telling the students the ideal responses. We are letting them experience it for themselves in the small-sided game, and then guiding them through the process of understanding by asking these open-ended questions. Now, later on in the module, I've also provided you with a downloadable blank model, and one of the tasks later in your applied task will be to come up with a game, work out what outcomes you're going to use, come up with 3 or 4 key questions related to the outcomes. You can see it's only a small box that I've left for the key points. That is, you might just put 1 or 2 things that will help you remember how to use it. So it could be, for example, summarize 2 or 3 key student responses. So you could write that within that box there. And then 3 or 4 task constraints. And that is basically your pedagogy for teaching a small-sided game.